In this video, we are going to implement World Space UI for our enemy tanks so that we can see how much damage we have dealt to our tanks, as well as we are going to improve our visuals to implement this big explosion as well as the explosion sound when we kill our enemy. Let's get going! This video is part of the series of videos about creating a 2D top-down tank game. We will explore different features of this game, each as a standalone video. Hi, I'm Peter and welcome to Sunny Valley Studio Tutorials. In the previous video we have implemented some feedback for our shooting mechanic so that we have our muzzle flash, our bullet flies, now there is a sound of the shot, and there is a sound of an explosion, and the explosion is being spawned. And that's what we did in the last video. If we stop our game, now our tank that is patrolling, so patrolling enemy and the static enemy, has the damageable script on it, which defines how much health does the tank has. Let's set it to be 20. Now, our player is using the bullet data, fast bullet data, which removes 5 damage from our enemy on being shot. So the static enemy has 20 health, so after 4 shots it should be dead. But if we go and place the game, and if we shoot it, okay, indeed it does happen that after 4 shots it is destroyed, but we have no idea, no feedback how much will it take to destroy this enemy. We will implement some kind of UI. Okay, we are in our end project, and if we drive towards our enemy, it has a UI bar. If we shoot it, it will decrease the health of our enemy, and we will know that after 4 shots the enemy will be destroyed. So that's what we want to implement. Okay, so to add UI to our tank, let's go to our static enemy and let's open this prefab, and inside it we have our enemy tank agent, and what we would like to add here is the UI above our enemy. So let's right click, select UI, and we are going to select the canvas object. Now our canvas component has the render mode. Now we have different render modes. We have screen space overlay, screen space camera, and world space. And basically we want to have our UI in the world space, so that's what we need to select. Now next we have some changes in the inspector. We have our sorting layer, so what layer should display our UI. And since we have preset some sorting layers, I want to select the UI which is at the top of everything. Great. Now we do not need the canvas scaler, so I'm going to remove it, remove the component, and the graphic raycaster, again remove it. Now we do not want to have the width and height, so I'm going to set it to be 0 and 0, and position X and Y to be 0. What remains is to actually create our UI for the health bar. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to select UI and select the panel, and this will be our health bar. Okay, now our panel currently has left and top and right and bottom parameters. To be able to set the width and height instead, I'm going to select our anchor preset in our rect transform, and I'm going to select Shift and Alt, which Shift sets the pivot and Alt sets the position to be in the bottom right corner. And now this will set the parameters here in the inspector for the rect transform to contain the width and height instead. So what we can do is I'm going to set the width to be 1.16. So this will be really small values, so we can place it in the world space, and the height will be 0.2, for example. And this is our health bar, as you can see here. Now we have a couple of images in our sprites. We have our Kenny top-down assets, but also the Kenny UI pack. So I'm going to go to PNG files, and I'm going to search for the gray button 03. And I'm going to set the color for it to be black and the alpha to be 1. So now we have our black bar, which will be the background of our health panel. Now we are going to use the UI slider for this setup. And for the UI slider, so the slider component to be used, we will need to have a certain preset for our health fill. So the red bar that will fill in this health bar. So I'm going to right click on this UI and select the panel. And this will be our health fill panel. And we are going to disable the image. And inside this, we are going to right click, create UI, and select another panel. And this will be our health fill. Okay, I'm going to again go to our project and to our PNG for the Kenny UI pack, and I'm going to search for the red button 00, which will be our image for our health fill. I'm going to check the color and again set the alpha to be full and the color to be red. So now we have our health bar, so health fill for our health bar. Now I'm going to select our health bar, and to the health bar game object I will add slider. This is a UI component that will allow us to create a simple slider. Now I want to disable the interactable since I do not want to interact with it. There will be no transition, and I'm going to set the navigation to be none. Now this leaves us with the fill rect, which will be our health fill panel. Now it will become empty, so the red color will be gone. But now we have value slider, which goes from 0, which is the min value, to 1, which is max value. And if we slide it, we can see that now we have our health bar, which works pretty good. All I need to do now is select our health bar, select a move tool in the game scene view, and I'm going to move it above our enemy. And maybe I want to set the height to be like something like 0.15 to make it a bit smaller. Okay, this should be good. Now to see it in our game view, I'm going to Ctrl S to save this prefab, and now we can see our health bar above our enemy. Now there are two things that we need to still do. First one, we will need to connect this slider game object or other component with our enemy. And for this, if we expand our enemy, we have already created this in our damageable script. We can see that we have on health change. And this passes a value from 0 to 1, which is the health value divided by the max health value. And what we need to do is add to this on health change a listener, drag our health bar, and I'm going to select the function slider, and I'm going to select the value. So our value will be set to the health divided by the max health. And now the health bar should be working. But last thing that we will need is to actually make our canvas follow our enemy, since right now enemy will be moving using our tank controller, but the canvas will stay in place. Remember that it is in world space, so we can simply set to it the position that we want, so the position of our enemy basically. So let's go to our scripts folder, let's right click, create new script object, and I'm going to call it UI follow tank. And let me open it in Visual Studio. Okay, I'm going to paste here the code that we will use. First, we will have a couple of fields, which are the transform, which is the reference to the object, our enemy tank, that we want this UI to follow. And the second one will be the direct transform of our component. We are going to add this UI follow tank on our canvas. So basically, this will be our direct transform of our canvas. So all the UI for our tank will follow our tank. And since our canvas has position 0, 0, we can simply set in the update, if object to follow is different than null, we are going to set direct transform.anchored position equals object to follow.local position. So this will be the local position because our tank is inside our static enemy. So we can't really use position, we will need to use the local position. So the position of the transform relative to the parent of the transform. Let's save it. Let's go back to Unity. Generate. I'm going to select the canvas. I'm going to add here the UI follow tank, and I'm going to select our enemy tank to be the object to be followed. And I'm going to save it. Let's go back to the Unity, and I'm going to activate the patrol enemy, which is the prefab variant of our static enemy. Now our canvas should have the enemy tank as the tank to be followed, as you can see, so it should work all right. So I'm going to press play, and first thing that we will see that our UI is following our tank that is patrolling, and if we hit our tank, our UI should be working fine, as you can see. And now our second tank had the health set to be less than 20, so we have killed it in one shot. Last thing that I would like to implement is a way to disable this canvas and only enable it when we hit the enemy, so we can see that this enemy was damaged, but when it is full health, the health bar will be gone. So we will want to open our static enemy prefab, since this is the original prefab for the enemy. and I want to disable the canvas, and I will select our enemy tank, and I can see that we have some unused event on hit. I'm going to assign our canvas. I'm going to select our game object, set active to be true. So now if we go back, let's save the prefab, we should see that our static enemy has canvas disabled. Our patrolling enemy, I will need to select it, and I will select our canvas, disable it, and let's see our enemy tank, and the on hit has already the preset. So I'm going to go back, save this, and now if we select our patrolling enemy, let's increase the health of it to be 20. If we press play now, we should be able to see that if we go and hit the enemy, the canvas will appear, and we can see that we are hitting our static enemy, and we can hit our enemy that is patrolling. Okay, and I think our static enemy has the default enemy disabled. That's why it was not shooting, so let's press play again. Let's see if it will start shooting at us. Okay, and you can see now it looks pretty nice. We have this mechanic working. Great. Now before we finish this, I would like to improve the look of our enemy. So I will go to our enemy tank, open the prefab, and I will select our tank base and select the sprite, and I will select some other type of body, so this big body. I'm going to select the prefab variant, select the capsule collider, and I will increase it so that we can have the appropriate damage done to our tank. So it is bigger, it will need a bigger collider. And basically I will want to add another turret and modify the looks of the turret. So our tank turret has currently the tank blue barrel. I will select a different barrel. It will be this red special barrel. And I will want to create two barrels for this tank. So I will select this barrel and select the move tool and move it a bit up. Okay. And I'm going to duplicate it, Ctrl D, and select the Y value and add a minus to it. So we have two tank barrels. Great. Now if I save this prefab, our tank will look like this. And if I go back and enable our patrolling enemy, our patrolling enemy will look like this as well. Since our scripts for our turrets allow us to create multiple turrets, now if we press play, we will see that our enemy now is rotating and shooting from two turrets at the same time. So now what we can do is modify the data for our bullet and for our tank. Our turret data has the data for our turret. And I have created the new enemy turret data scriptable object that takes the bullet prefab that has the reload delay equals 1, and that uses the slow bullet, which has the speed, and I will set the speed to be something like 3, the damage to be 3, and max distance to be 10. All we need to do is open up the enemy tank variant, select the tank turret, and I will add to this tank data to be our enemy turret, and the second tank turret will be also enemy turret data. If I go back and save the prefab, now our enemies will shoot a bit slower. Okay, now we will have one issue with our setup. If we slide to the back, you can see that our turret is now trying to shoot, but at the same time is moving, so trying to patrol. Why is that? So the issue is in our AI script called AI detector. Now we are using view radius, and we are using it for both detecting if the player is out of range, as well as to check if the player is in range. And it causes the target to be set to be player, and then target to be set to be null. So the tank tries to rotate our turret to patrol. Next, it again sets the target to be the player, so it tries to shoot, and again it goes back to patrolling and shooting, and it goes interchangeably. So I will set the view radius check in our detect if out of range to be view radius plus 1. And now we will detect a bit further if the player is out of range, but if the player is out of range, the check if player is in range will not set the target back to the player because the view radius is smaller than view radius plus 1. So let's save it. Let's go back to Unity. Okay, let me disable the patrolling enemy to not distract us. And I'm going to press play. So now we should be able to see that if we drive towards this enemy, okay, it starts to shooting at us. If I go backwards, now it goes back to patrolling. and it doesn't interchangeably check if our player is in range or not. If we go forward, again it starts shooting. Again, if we go back enough, it will stop and go back to patrolling. One last thing that I want to implement is now if we shoot our enemy, it will simply create our shot explosion, but the tank will disappear. So instead of this, I would like to have some kind of explosion sound as well as prefab for creating the explosion. So what I did was I have created a tank explosion override, and I have used another tank explosion animation and created the prefab. So I have used the explosion, which is our prefab for generating this small explosion, and I have created a prefab variant which is called big explosion, which has this new animation. It is scaled by 2 on X and Y, and it uses our canny top-down PNG retina, and we have this second type of explosion sprites. So we were using this with the smoke for our hit explosion, and I would like to use this without smoke for the explosion of our tank, and this is the big explosion. As well as I have created another prefab. We had our impact sound, which is our sound for our impact, and I have created another prefab that is called our tank explosion sound variant, and this is using a different sound, and it is a bit louder. It has 0.5 sound volume, and it is in our Kenny Assets Sci-Fi Sounds audio, and I have created a short version of Explosion Crunch 001, and this will be our sound for the explosion. So what do we do with those prefabs? I will delete them from the hierarchy, and I will go to our tank prefab. So let me go to our prefabs, tank, and let's open it up. And here what I will do is I will simply create a new game object called death feedback. Okay, and I'll add here our generator, object generator random position, and this will be our explosion, so big explosion variant. I will limit the radius to be 0.1, and I will add instantiate util, which we have created previously, and this simply instantiates our a prefab somewhere, and this will be our explosion sound variant. All I need to do now is select our tank, our damageable, and in our damageable we have all those parameters, and here we have our damageable script which has our Unity events. So on death I would like to simply spawn our death feedback and select our object generator create object, as well as I would like to drag our death feedback again, select our instantiate util and instantiate object, which will basically instantiate our explosion variant and explosion sound when we are destroyed, so when we destroy our tank. Let's save it. Let's go back. Now we may have overridden our on death event, because for now, for example, our player should have the player, and we should disable our game object set active to be false when we die. And for our enemy, we can see that we are indeed overriding our on death, so we do not have those events implemented. So let's go to our enemy tank variant, and we are going to add here on death again our death feedback, select our instantiate util and create an instantiate object, again add new event listener death feedback, and we are going to select our object generator and create object. Let's select Ctrl S to save this. Let's go back, and now it should implement those two feedback functions. So if we press play and if we kill our enemy, we should see our feedback. You can see the big explosion as well as the explosion sound was played. And basically that's it, how we can improve the visuals for our tank explosion, our tank death, as well as our enemies, how they look. And now for our patrol enemy, our tank should be preset, so it should have the same functionality as for our static enemy. Okay, so hopefully it has shown you how to implement our canvas in the world space to implement the UI for the enemy, as well as how easy it is to tweak our enemies and to add our feedback to on-death event, for example, using those events that we have implemented, our Unity events on death, on hit and on health change. Great! Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial. If you want to support me, please take a look at my Patreon website. Check out my Udemy course about creating a 2D top-down shooter using the URP and Unity 2020. There will be a link with a discount in the description if you are interested. Leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Take care!